For hundreds of years, Japan was ruled by the samurai, the great warriors who fought with spears and bows and arrows, but mostly with swords. They were the greatest swordsmen, and every one of them carried two swords, a long one and a short one. In fact, the samurai were known as two-sword men. Now, at this time, when the samurai ruled, there were classes in society in Japan. The lowest were the merchants. Above them, the artisans who made things. Above them, the farmers who planted things. And the highest, most powerful, and most respected of all, the samurai. Now, more than 500 years ago, there was a real samurai named Bokuden. And he was known all over Japan for his swordsmanship. He was the best sword fighter anybody knew. But though his name was known all over Japan, his face was not. You realize this was a time when there were no movies, no television, no cameras, no national newspapers, no iPods, no computers, no television to show you someone who was famous but lived far away. And so when Bokuden left home and went to travel to a religious festival far from his home, he went where no one knew his face. To get to the festival, he needed to cross a large lake, Lake Biwa, which is right in the center of Japan. At its southern end, it's very shallow, and the way you crossed the lake at that time was in a boat. The boatman would take a pole and plant it in the bottom of the lake and push that ferry across the lake. Bokuden came down and climbed aboard the boat and went to the very front, to the bow, and stood waiting as the boat filled with people. This was a very popular festival, and farmers and artisans and government officials, grandparents and grandchildren, aunts and uncles, they all crowded onto the boat until there was no place to sit or stand. It was full. And as the boatman was about to push off, they heard a cry from up the road. "Wait! Wait for me!" And they looked up, and there was a young samurai coming down the road, a big, beefy fellow, maybe 20, 25 years old. He stepped onto the boat, and he didn't care who was in his way. He just pushed people aside, stepped on people, until he had gotten up and was standing next to Bokuden. Now, Bokuden was much his senior. He had a gray beard like mine. The young samurai turned to the boatman and said, "You may leave now." And the boatman didn't need to be asked twice. He put his pole in the bottom of the lake and pushed off and pushed the boat out into the middle of the lake. Now, it was a windy day, and the boat began to rock with the waves, and one wave hit the boat and jarred it, and a farmer who was sitting very close to the samurai slipped off his seat, and his foot hit the scabbard of the sword of that young samurai. That samurai looked down at him. "You clod, you worm, you piece of dirt! How dare you strike my sword with your filthy sandal?" The farmer bowed down to him. "Oh, highborn, please forgive me. It was no disrespect. It was just the motion of the boat that made me slip from my seat." "Lost your balance, did you? Well, let us see how well you balance with one foot." But when the young samurai went to strike with his sword, he found his arm held back, and he turned and saw that Bokuden had a firm grip on his sleeve. "Stay out of this, old man. This is none of your business." Bokuden bowed to him. "Sir, I see that, like me, you are a two-sword man. Think carefully before you do something that any true samurai would regret in the morning." Now you will teach me to be a samurai, will you? Well, we'll see who's the better samurai. Draw your sword and defend yourself. But you should know that I am a student of the way of the invincible. Invincible, there's a great word, means you cannot be beaten. Bokuden bowed to him. Ah, I am a student of the way of winning without hands, but we cannot fight here in the boat. It is too crowded. Boatman, take us to that island over there. Now, it wasn't really an island. It was a little sandbar in the middle of the lake with a few scrubby bushes growing on it. But when they came close, that young samurai leapt off the bow of the boat onto the shore, drew his other sword, and stood there, ready to fight. Bokuden turned to the boatman. Boatman, give me your pole. And he took the boatman's pole and planted it in the bottom of the lake. And with a mighty shove, he pushed that boat back out into deeper water. And the young samurai stood on the shore of that little island, shouting, "Come back, you coward! I knew you were afraid to fight me!" And Bokuden just bowed to him. "Sir, did I not tell you that I am a student of the way of winning without hands? Boatman, here's your pole. Take us to the festival." And the boatman turned the boat and proceeded on across the lake, leaving that young samurai shouting and waving his swords, stuck on that island in the middle of the lake. And you remember that farmer who had slipped off his seat. He bowed low to Bokuden. "Sir, thank you for saving my life. May I know your name?" "My name is Bokuden." And when he said those words, everybody in the boat drew in their breath. They knew that name. And they knew that if there had been a fight on that island, that young samurai would have died. For Bokuden was the most famous sword fighter in all of Japan. And from that day forward, all the people in that boat told everyone they knew, their neighbors, their aunts and uncles, their grandparents and grandchildren, about the day when the great Bokuden had taught them a lesson from the Bushido, the way of the warrior, that sometimes a samurai's most important battles are won without ever drawing his sword.